Okay, we're looking to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a review for you from the brand Ginault. They were founded back in 2012, and let's just jump right into it. They have had a bit of drama around kind of their USA made, hand built verbiage on the dial and kind of their history. So I will go ahead and lay out kind of their official statements on where things are produced before we jump into this. Now, the main parts, such as the mid case, case backs, and bezel assemblies, are CNC'd at contracted machine shops here domestically. Each mid case bezel assembly is then hand finished. Dials and final assembly plus regulation are also all done domestically within the USA. Other auxiliary parts, such as the gaskets, O-ring, bracelets, and inserts, are sourced from suppliers in Asia. The movement is Swiss because they are now using the Swiss Leda SW200 at an elaborate grade, which is also regulated in-house, and have moved away from their kind of more proprietary movement that they were, moving forward with back in kind of the original inception of the brand, or at least its kind of second coming to the market. Now, this type of watch is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design language. You're looking for a diver. You're going to want water resistance, typically with some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is the Ginault Silent Service, and this is configured in with the 60-minute no date configuration. So you're going to get that traditional dive bezel and also in a no date layout. And it's basically Ginault's first real step away from a direct homage into a more original territory, still inspired by iconic diver elements, but now infusing some Omega DNA and Rolex together for something that's fresh, that still feels quite classic. Now, it does also still contain many custom manufactured components, hand assembled and regulated in the US. So still strong if those are things that you value. I think even if you don't value those things, there's a lot of value within this timepiece just because of how well it's done. And I think really how well it's designed as well. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, check this out. Now, before we dive completely into it, let's kind of see where this brand came from. Here's their original Ginault Ocean Rover, and it's definitely, of course, very clearly inspired by Rolex. But what they did is they kind of combined some modern elements with like the bracelet and everything with some old school elements like the maxi lugs there, and then also with the aluminum bezel insert, and then the kind of patinaed lume there. Also maxi dial, so they mix things in, right? So you're getting non-maxi case with a maxi dial with a little bit of patina. It's a really interesting look, and then it also was using those military style sword hands, and it's I mean, on its own, in its own right, just because of how well it's produced and executed, it's a fine watch. The design wise didn't sit too well with everybody. It was quite polarizing. Either you loved it because you are into homages and you like mill subs and you'll never be able to get one, and this is something that you could technically wear and use within that capacity and never have to worry about, or you were hoping that they would do something eventually a little bit more original. And I'm one of those people that was like, wow, if they can create this, let's imagine that same level of execution on something that is a little bit more original. And that's what you have here, guys. And some of you might be thinking, oh, well, if they just infuse some more DNA from Omega, then, how original is it? But I will say, guys, there are plenty of, especially within the independent micro brand space, there are especially European brands that are huge. They're multiples of thousands of dollars for straight up homages, where they're just taking, Genta style case and mixing in, a Rolex style dial, and then making it sandwiched, cut out like a Panerai. And they're very popular. And a lot of it has to do with just the prestige around European products and small batches. This product is a little bit different in that Ginault was, very much say, hey, look, we're big and making sure that we're doing things domestically within the U.S. So it didn't catch on as much. I think the marketing and the approach, they probably weren't as quite aligned as the actual product. And you really can't get mad at people for that. I mean, it's watch enthusiasts at the end of the day. This isn't run by a bunch of marketing guys. It's not like there was some social media mogul who decided, hey, I want to start building my own watch. It was watch fans that said, hey, let's make our own watch. So at the end of the day, if you're looking for kind of the drama element of what's behind the Ginault brand, there's plenty of videos for that on YouTube. Here I'm just going to focus on the product because it's impressive, and honestly people have been asking about it, and I've been personally interested in following Ginault's Instagram just to kind of see updates as they do, kind of all this to come together, and for them to kind of come back out with something exciting again. So this is the silent service, and it goes for, as seen here, for $14.99 in the no date configuration, or you can get it for $16.99 with the date, or $17.99 with the Cyclops. Now there are pre-order discounts that are still available, which pretty much will put this into the $1,000 to $1,300 range, depending on the different setup that you get. One thing that's different is that there's a bit of a difference in size. It's been sized up a little bit, and also the shoulders have been widened. So now, before they had kind of the more pre-maxi case, now you're getting the more modern case. So you can see there's that slight taper here, a little bit more squared off. But ultimate dimensions wise, it's still a 40 millimeter watch, but now the bezel is actually about 40 and a half. And you can see the bezel style is more kind of Seamaster, that original Seamaster 300 inspired. Same thing with the dial. And what I really like about that is that it's still taking pieces that were, military spec. At the time there was, and you'll see a lot of watches with stuff like that have layouts like the Seamaster, because that was a military spec and people kind of built to that spec. And I think infusing that with this here, it does something really nice, and I think it comes together really great. And again, there are tons of brands, guys, don't just fool yourselves. There are tons of brands, some with pretty decent high levels of prestige, at least to where people are comfortable spending multiples of thousands of dollars on essentially similar formulas, an homage that takes what you love about other watches, puts it together into one watch. I mean, the Christopher Ward brand, the Trident C60 was built off of just, hey, let's take these Bremont elements, let's take these Seamaster elements, let's take these Rolex elements and put them together. So for somebody else to do that and to be able to produce at such a high level, I can't hate. So the dimensions are going to be, this actually is 11.8 millimeters thick, 47.9 lug to lug. It's all 316L stainless steel. It is brushed and polished, and let's just take a look at that transition on that, which is very nice. Look at that beveled edge between the brushing on the case and the high polished side, and then that nice rolled bevel. It looks fantastic. That is something that has become, I'd say, more prevalent with micro brands, but to be executed to this level, definitely not as common as you may think. Let me give it a quick wipe here, only because this thing is so well finished. I do want to make sure that you guys do get to take a look at it. Big thanks to Ginault for sending this out for a review. This is one of their kind of circulating review pieces. So you also are getting a flat sapphire, which has a nice chamfered edge, and it has 3 times application of super clear AR coating, which is great, and also a change of pace from the from the previous. So you're getting flat with the AR coating versus here, I want to say this one didn't have any type of anti-reflective coating, to be kind of true to that more Rolex style. Here with the AR coating, you can see it really accentuates the dial, especially with a flat bezel. So it's really negotiating any type of reflections extremely well, and you're able to see that texture, and the crystal really does disappear. And then you have it at angle, and you're going to get a little bit of play there within that chamfer, you can see. So very, very nice and handsome from that perspective. You're getting a 120 click unidirectional rotating bezel with a sapphire insert. Ooh, which is fully lumed. Even with these gloves, wow. Very nice. Just a little touch, of kind of, you want to call it back play. Lines up great. Again, I would describe this as just really dialed in. It's extremely smooth while being nice and notchy and tactile feeling. So really dialed in bezel action there. Oh, very different than the bezel action from the Ocean Rover. I mean, the Ocean Rover wasn't bad, but this just feels taken to another level in terms of just how solid and the level of smoothness, and just everything just feels more put together. So very nice from that perspective. You get a screw down crown, which has been signed. So let's take a look there. It's that same flower motif that you get on the dial. And then inside, although you can't see it, is a Sellita SW200 Labore grade. And it's regulated in-house, so this one is running really well. Even the case back looks a little bit different. Again, I have a very, very early model from before, but which was more true to the Rolex style case back. Here, a little bit more updated, and you can see has a bit of etching there. And yeah, the movement is great. It's working out like you would expect from a Sellita. And in terms of getting into the dial here, maybe there's some contention in terms of the text on the dial, but the general layout, you get that fine matte black dial. So you are going to have a bit of texture, but it is not super grainy. It's a nice kind of balance there with the matte, where it's smooth as well, not glossy in any way, but basically a flat surface. You have these nicely applied indices, polished sword, hour, and minute hands with that red kind of yacht master style seconds hand, and then you're getting hand applied lume, which glows blue. So it looks like BGW9. It's water resistant up to 300 meters, which is fantastic, or 1,000 feet. And then in terms of the bracelet, this is just as you would expect. It's fantastic. 20 millimeter lug width, solid links and end links, that oyster bracelet with that 17.5 millimeter glide lock style clasp, and then it tapers from 20 millimeters down to about 15.3. This is the second gen bracelet, and it's really well executed. It's kind of tighter mid-link tolerances, slightly reprofiled clasp for enhanced comfort and durability. So they've gone the extra mile, and I mean, one of the best things about the old Ginaults was the bracelet, and they've made that even better, and it works really well. And I liked it also, they mentioned, hey, this is something that we outsource. There are brands that are huge right now, like Omega, they have Asian bracelets, and they're not really advertising that unless you go get a replacement part and then you see where it was made. So I'm not upset at that. At the end of the day, it's just really nicely done, and I think maybe there's only reason why there's extra attention is because of they wanted to take a point of pride to say, hey, look, we produce things here in the States, and because they put onus on where something's produced, people care about where it's produced. If they would have just kind of steered clear of any side of that, then maybe they wouldn't got to kind of take that extra victory lap to say, hey, look, there's a lot of custom components we're having machined and milled. At the end of the day, this isn't a catalog watch where they're just taking components that already exist and kind of putting them together in another combination and slapping their own branding on it. I think the branding is actually nice in terms of the name and the logo. I think some of the other stuff is just, you know, it's a lot in terms of what's on the dial. There's a lot of text there, which, you know, again, I don't mind it. It does add some balance in between, of course, the 12 and 6 o'clock. So I can understand that from that standpoint, but I'm definitely more of a minimalist person, so I probably would have reduced the writing to kind of just what the bare minimum was needed, but by no means does it detract or you know, offset any of the balance that comes with this really well designed dial. So with all that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this looks really fantastic. I mean, quintessential kind of black and steel layout. Definitely a lot more modern on the wrist. I mean, this is just gorgeous, and honestly, at distance, I don't think it would be mistaken for a sub or a Seamaster, and I think that's a good thing. But it will definitely, you look at it and you would think, oh man, if you're into dive watches, it's definitely something that would catch your eye, just because the use of these, you know, very bold, quite iconic feature sets, but just in something that looks very different. You know, you're not getting those Omega style lugs. You're going to get a very, you know, Rolex profile when it comes to that bracelet and case, except you don't have crown guards, right? And you get this nice crown that's nice and beefy, that matches similar grip to the bezel, and it's handsome. It looks good. There's a reason why this stuff is so timeless and legible. It's because it works. It's a great look, and it lays nice and flat on the wrist. You can see there. And it wears like you would expect. It does have a little bit more visual punch, guys. Very classic proportions, comfortable and balanced wear, but because of the proportion change where you're going to get slightly wider lugs, you know, it's going to be a little bit larger. And I think this is marketed as a 41, but you know what? So is the new sub, and it's those who have measured it will tell you that it's not really 41 millimeters. It's you know, sometimes there's some rounding up that happens there, and also some of it is just kind of marketing, because ultimately plus or minus 1 millimeter is really just half a millimeter on either side of the case. A lot of how something is going to wear is more about the proportions in terms of that bezel to dial ratio, and of course the lug to lug width. And here you can see it just does everything right on the wrist. So that's another thing you can't fault this watch for, is the way that it wears. It's really fantastic, and my gosh, look at the way the light just rolls off of that brushing. It's really impressively built. So with that, let's actually get into some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, this Lume is really outstanding. Really no way around it. It's really well done in terms of being a dive watch, and being very legible, instantly recognizable, great orientation. It does what works, and you still do have that full indexing, which I think always adds a certain level of professionalism within the timing bezel, although it is something that definitely brands do have to balance when they do design the dial, so it keeps things from looking very, very cluttered. Now, apart from the Lume shot, one thing I like to work in is low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of a building, walking underneath an overhang, maybe the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite automobile. So, you know, it's nice to see what the finishes, what the colors and textures render like in less than optimal lighting and mixed lighting situations, to include maybe some high contrast lighting here that would typically expose any type of you know, defects within that finish. You can see nice and uniform in terms of the light gliding over the brushing there, deep luster for the high polish, very nice. And you can see one really great thing is that that bezel just always reads inky dark black, and that's a nice advantage, is that it won't patina because it's sapphire. If this was acrylic, the acrylic would yellow and those markings would yellow over time, but the nice thing is it will stay crisp and clean looking, which I can really appreciate, and is not always the case even with expensive divers. The dial, you can see very deep black, but certain angles it will catch light in a certain way where it'll expose that matte flat finish, and it kind of gives you a bit of an anthracite flavor to it, which I think is another nice little play of the design there with the light and the balancing. So very nice. They could have easily went with a glossy dial. I mean, their previous dials on the Ocean Rover were pretty much all predominantly that really nice lacquery black glossy finish. So I think this finish here, it just adds to that more subdued look to include with what that flat sapphire does, which is great, guys. Look at that. Very, very nice. Still quite legible. Lume's holding up great. All right. Look, now the dial is getting more of that kind of gray, cool tone to it. Closing thoughts here, guys. On the wrists, again, classic proportions, very comfortable, balanced wear. In terms of model variants, this is also available with a bi-directional 12-hour traveler's bezel insert, which is great. And the bezel itself is actually updated. The grip is the same, but instead of it having those clicks, it's, from what I understand, more friction fit, which is appropriate for that type of bezel. I think it has something like 12 clicks actually in it, so which would probably be fun to play with, but that's not the one that I was really interested in. The one I was interested in is this one, the diver for the dive watch. And in terms of comparable models, say what you will about the brand history, or the model design, but the build quality is undeniably within the conversation of the best fit and finish under $2,500. I mean, it's right up there with some of the finest finish watches that I've ever experienced. It's that good. If that's enough for you, then that's what you want. Then that's something that you're going to argue about. It's, for me, I'd always would like something a little bit more original. I think it would be nice if they updated the bracelet in a way that was not as much. I mean, I guess they have. The taper is a little bit different on it in terms of the linkage. But I think it would be nice to see them, exert some of that prowess again and adding and updating. But I think this is definitely a step within the right direction. And yeah, if you're gonna copy a bracelet, copy one of the best. My goodness, there's plenty of bracelets that decided to do the opposite of Rolex does, just to be different, and they doesn't make them good just because they're different, and it doesn't make this one bad just because it's the same. So for me, guys, the bottom line, it has an eclectic blend of Rolex and Omega military, diving styling cues, and it's executed to a level well above your average mid-tier Swiss brand. Think Oris, but nicer, guys. I mean, you put this next to a Diver 65, that Diver 65 is not gonna feel anywhere near as nice or substantial, and it's not a bad watch. The Diver 65 it's a great solid piece, but I mean, this just knocks the socks off of it. Same goes for something like a Longines Hydro Conquest. I mean, there's really nice, fine watches you can be proud of that just aren't built this well. And they don't, to a certain extent, they don't need to be, because they're not an upstart brand that's fighting an uphill battle. They're able to just say, hey, this is the price point I sell in, and I will sell something and I will just update the design. Here, they don't have that luxury at Ginault. They're really trying to build something great to get people excited about. And in terms of like the audience for this watch, I find it's kind of very anti-establishment. There's a lot of people who almost fawn over this watch as kind of a message, you know, a middle finger to the rest of the industry. And then there's guys that are just like me that have a bunch of watches and can appreciate, wow, that's a really nice watch, you know, and not really go digging for any drama. In the end, many brands have been built off of the backs of homage watches, whether it be, you know, kind of the the unknown models that kind of come from Squala or Squale, if you want to give it the Italian accent, or Devosa, or even Seiko. There's tons of Seiko watches that clearly are paying homage to other models, some of them not Seikos. So there's always kind of that high volume need for these designs that are classic and timeless that carry over, but where maybe you can save a few bucks because you're going to you know, not have to pay for the marketing department's money. So this, you know, this blend, you know, it really reminds me of, again, of kind of early Christopher Ward, blending Rolex, Omega, and Bremont DNA into kind of the first C60 range. And I really dig this. And I mean, in terms of quality wise and fit and finish and everything, I mean, this is well above what you would get from Christopher Ward. And Christopher Ward, you guys have seen them on my channel. They're great watches. They definitely are a lot more original now, which is great. And I think they're really coming into their own in terms of some of their designs. They haven't really resonated with me recently, with some of the new stuff and the directions they're going. But, you know, I know they do quality stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. But in terms of Ginault, it's the same thing. Hey, quality stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next. And this was the next step logically for them. It's what people have been asking for. And I think it's a great step in the right direction. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I know this was a bit of a long one. But hey, if you made it this long, make sure you do leave a comment and let me know what you think. So with that said, you know, if you liked the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.